Oh, well, hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 20 of the Paws Up podcast. This is such a cool milestone to hit episode 20 of the podcast when this series began just last November. But we're super grateful to everyone who's watching this on our Twitter or on Lemon City's YouTube and Facebook. And we have a super awesome guest making some Paws Up podcast history. The first professional athlete we have had on the show. Welcome to the show, Raja Bell. How are you doing, Raja?
I'm doing well. It's an honor, fellas. Thanks for having me. I mean, first former pro athlete and 20th anniversary episode, man. Like, I appreciate it.
Two crazy milestones in one episode. And of course, my good friend Kevin Burrell and Jonathan Mayer. Johnny, you're on this show so many times. You're basically a co-host as well. Let's not.
Just put me on.
Yeah. So. So we have an awesome episode today, talking a bit of basketball, and of course, perfect timing to talk a bit of both collegiate and professional, as we are just in the midst of an amazing NBA playoff stretch here. But before we get to that, let's just talk a bit, Raja, about your time growing up before you even made the trip to FIU. So let's go back as far as we can. All right, growing up in Miami. Just what originally got you into the sport of basketball?
Man, so my dad was a PE coach, and I lived in the Virgin Islands until I was about 12 years old. And so I played every sport, and I tagged along with all of his teams. And, you know, I was a little kid on the bus or shooting jump shots at halftime of the game. So, I always played, but my main sport was tennis in the Virgin Islands. And so when I moved here in the 8th grade, I moved to Miami, there just weren't as many outlets to play tennis. And, you know, I was going to Ponce de Leon Middle School down in Coral Gables. And, you know, basketball was the sport. I loved football, but they didn't have it in school, and I didn't know where to go find it. And so more kids that I was hanging out with at that time were hooping. And so it really served two purposes. Like, I loved it, and it was a way for me to make friends quick because I was new, and you know, all those kids had gone to elementary school together. So the fact that I was decent at it and could hold my own helped me become, you know, I guess more popular in a new setting for me. So, and then I figured out I was pretty good at it. So I lived in the gym over at University of Miami. It was the old CSR, with a lot of those old Hurricane greats that were winning national championships. They were like big brothers. They just beat me up and pushed me around. I'd hop in a game here and there, but that kind of fostered my love for it.
So you mentioned the moment that you felt like you knew that you were good at this sport, but what was the moment in your life that you knew that basketball was going to be something that you think you could go pro at, that you felt like you were going to make waves in the big leagues? You
know, that didn't happen until my senior year at FIU. I just knew that I wanted to play and I loved it. And, you know, it was what I woke up every morning wanting to do, and that had to be something. So as long as I was going to be able to do it, I would do it. But I really didn't think I didn't know that I was a pro. I didn't know that was going to be an avenue for me until we played in an University of Arizona Christmas tournament. It was us, Penn State, Arizona, and some other cupcake for Arizona. And we beat Penn State. Yeah, I mean, that's what it was, right? Like, they brought us out there like kind of lambs to the slaughter for Penn State, and then they were supposed to see Arizona, but we beat Penn State pretty good. And then we saw Arizona, and we played the heck out of them. I hate to say that we got cheated, but we didn't get the Ferris whistle that night. But anyway, after a scout from the Atlanta Hawks, Pete Babcock, came up and he told me that he was there to see a lot of people. You know, I was not on that list, but he thought that of all of them there, you know, over the weekend, I had the best showing, and he thought I could be a pro. And so that was the first time I'd ever heard it. It was the first time I had really ever seriously considered it, other than just being a dream, as a possibility.
You know, that sounds, excuse me, Kevin, I just wanted to bring up something that the way you just described that reminded me a lot of this interesting piece that Johnny found earlier today. Oh, look at this. It's from a media program back in the day. Let's do a quick read here. A team leader who possesses outstanding abilities on the court. very competitive with a no-nonsense attitude. Oh, and he has a knack for scoring and great court savvy.
Wow. First of all, I mean, is a pretty exciting explanation of who I was. But did you see the mustache?
Yes.
Like the mustache. Listen, you guys aren't of age yet, right? This is pretty free flowing pod, right? You'll get to that age where you're gonna look back. I'm at that age, and you're like, man, what were you doing, man? Like, what's going on?
It took me some time to find that. I went to an archives place in the library, and they gave me this whole box of like all media guides. I'm looking through it. I see that year. I flip through it. I see you, 20-year-olds. See Carlos Arroyo as an 18-year-old. I'm like, I gotta take a pic of this. Like, probably nobody has this. Probably like a coach from like 20 years ago. I'm like, I gotta save it. You know,
it's hard to find a good media journal nowadays. Like it's hard, but yeah, that was super cool. Blast in the past. Anyway, go on, Kevin. I know you were about to spit heat.
Yeah, Raja. So, some people might not know this, but you didn't begin your career with FIU. In fact, you began playing for Boston University, the Terriers, where you averaged 12.9 points per game, 4.2 rebounds, 1.5 assists, and just a good field goal percentage. Talk to us just about the decision to go to Boston originally, and then, what kind of made you decide that it's time to transfer over to FIU?
Yeah. So, oddly enough, none of the Florida schools really recruited me. I guess they didn't see it in me coming out of high school. So, I had a really good senior season, and my junior year, I had garnered the attention of a lot of mid-major programs, like the BUs of the world. They found me up at 5-star in Caryopoulos, PA, Robert Morris College. And so they were in on me. And then I had a really good offensive senior year. I think I averaged close to 28 a game. And so, bigger schools like LSU and Georgetown and Temple started coming around. But I just felt really comfortable in my wheelhouse with people that were familiar with me, that had been with me, kind of before the explosion. And really, I wanted to play right away. So it didn't appeal to me to go somewhere and sit for 2 years maybe and let my body get right. I was like 180 pounds, 6'5". So to play in the SEC, I needed 20 pounds of muscle. That doesn't come overnight. And so BU was great. I loved Coach Brown. I had a great recruiting visit and loved all the guys. They're still lifelong friends of mine. And so, it felt like a great fit. And it was for a couple of years. I mean, I was, rookie of the year up there, and I got to play in the Olympic Festival coming out of there as one of the top, freshmen and seniors in the country at the time, kind of cultivating the pool of talent for the U.S. Olympic team. I was, second team all conference my second year. Things were going well, but I just felt like there was kind of a regulator on what I was going to be kind of allowed to do there, the freedom I had offensively. We had an excellent four-man. He was a year ahead of me. His name was Tunji Awajobi, and he had been rookie of the year before me. My second year, he was first team. I was second team. And he was going to be there for the next, 2 years. And I really wanted a little bit more freedom. And there had been a coaching change from when I was recruiting. And Coach Wolf and I are good friends now, but we didn't always see eye to eye either. So all of that took place. And then Shaky Rodriguez got the FIU job. And I had played for Shaky at in some summer situations in AAU. And I ran into him in the old Farm Ed League, which was a pro-am at FIU. And, he grabbed me in the gym and he said, "Hey, man, I don't know what you got going on." I at the time, I had like New Mexico State and some other schools I was interested in. He said, "But we're going to try to be Loyola Marymount. We're going to try to lead the country in scoring. And I want to put the ball in your hands and see what you can do." And at that point, as a 19-year-old, that was music to my ears, man. And I knew what Shake was about. And he told me that we had Damian McKnight was transferring home from Penn State. Darius Cook was coming from JUCO. He had played at Miami Northwestern. Sam Watts, all guys I was familiar with, having played against and knew him in high school. And my buddy Gene Durkak was already great. So there was a lot of talent there, and I felt pretty comfortable with what Shake was trying to do.
Adding to that, Raja, how good was it for you, comfortability factor of, being down in South Florida, playing right close to home, and, obviously another thing you added with playing with the great Shaky Rodriguez, who you played with before, and having that style probably helped you a little bit more in your college play.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, being home wound up being great for me. You know, at 17, 18, 19, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I was the most buttoned up human being. Like I had a lot going on. And so being a little closer to home was helpful for me. You know, Shake as a mentor, as a coach, as, you know, just his general philosophy and style were paramount to my success as a player, you know, as I got older and I moved on to the NBA because, you know, while some of that was in me and it was just DNA and it was how I played, I was always kind of made to feel, and I said this at Shakey's retirement, or his induction into the Miami High Hall of Fame. Like I was always made to feel ashamed of that. Like people try to, you know, my little bit of crazy was just a little too crazy for some people, you know. And Shake was the first person that really kind of, you know, made me feel like that was good and it could be even useful in certain scenarios and kind of unlock me like that. Mm-hmm. And without that, I would have never been able to reach the levels and do the things that I was able to do.
And last thing to hit on, you know, Roger talked about the experience at FIU. Before we got to dive into like the nuts, you know, about your time there, but talk about how attractive FIU was and really thinking about it at that time. You're talking about, you know, being one of those teams that play a high pace and moving the ball. How about talk more about the detail of FIU and really playing at a high paced offense that really set the tone for kind of mid majors nowadays?
Yeah, sure. We were, I mean, I think my first year there, we were a top 20 team in the country in terms of pace and points scored. And so, you know, obviously, you know, when you have a bunch of guys like myself and like the names I mentioned that all probably feel like for one reason or another they were overlooked in some instances. And, you know, we've all went to multiple schools, like there are chips on our shoulders. And, you know, Shakey always had that chip on his shoulder. And we scheduled like that. So we went out and we tried to find anyone who would play us. We'd go to Alabama. We'd go to Michigan. We went to Maryland. We were at Villanova, Notre Dame. Miami wouldn't play us like multiple years in a row. They refused to play us. It wasn't in their best interest. But that all spoke to me. It spoke to other people on our team, and we kind of comported ourselves like that. We were out there, you know, with something to prove. And so, you know, we played I think our slogan was RP 40, which was like relentless pressure over 40 minutes is what we had on the back of our jerseys. And, you know, we lifted our butts off with Lou Deneen. And when Lou wasn't around, Shakey would have us in Gold's Gym in the summer, you know, as the head coach and the strength and conditioning coach. We ran like animals. Like we were a really, really tough and finely tuned bunch. And it was fun to play on those teams. Like we knocked off a lot of people that thought we were going to be easy work, if you will.
Wow. Okay, so let's talk about the actual transition to FIU. When you first joined the Panthers, and when you first stepped foot in the MMC campus, what were some of the biggest differences between what you immediately saw there and what you experienced in Boston University that struck out to you the most?
Well, I mean, it was warm again. That was good. BU, I mean, we had a blizzard of 94. It was one of the biggest blizzards on record at the time.
Right.
So, you know, I was happy to be back in the warm weather. But honestly, you know, and I'd have to talk about the FIU now to kind of explain, like, it's got a lot going on. There are a lot of buildings. There's so much stuff to do. There are a lot of options. Back then, it was more of a commuter situation. So, you know, we didn't have dorms at the time when I got there. There was one built while I was there. All we had in terms of on-campus housing was the apartments right there off of that 107th right there. So you know, it was basically just your athletes and a few randoms in those apartments. So, you know, Boston University is right on Commonwealth Avenue in the heart of Boston. Fenway Park is right around the block. The Charles River sits right behind it. And so when I got to FIU, I was like, when the lights went out and everyone left campus is when I really remember it. Like when the campus stopped buzzing because of school. What the heck are we going to do? Like what? There's something going on. But it was a super tight-knit community of athletes. A lot of them soccer players, volleyball players, baseball players, basketball players, track participants. people like that are still in my circle of friends to this day because that's who we had when the lights went out at FIU, you know? So my initial thought was like, man, I don't know if there's going to be enough to get into, but we quickly figured it out. And at the time, there was no class on Friday. So on Thursday night, we were done for the week, and that was pretty cool too. We could be down on South Beach or wherever we wanted to be.
Was there seriously no class on Friday?
There were no classes on Friday. So Thursday night, you got your work done. Maybe you had practice later on Friday, but coaches were actually pretty cool about that. So, we could head down to the beach, do what we had to do, and still be back for an afternoon lift or something like that. It was pretty sweet.
Wow.
Now you see the campus now, which is like you got the big stadium or big dorms next to the stadium. You got there's everything is filled now. My dad went to school there. He's like, there was nothing there at FIU. It was all just land.
No,
now
it was an airfield that they decided to turn into a school.
Yeah. No, I mean, listen, when I go down now, I go down to see a game, or I'm bringing my family down, just to look around, or we're going to football practice or basketball practice. My kids are the prototypical oh, come on, Dad. Like, we've heard this 1,000 times, because I just can't help myself. I'm like, oh my God, none of this was here. Look at that. I was like, this used to be that. And it's like a completely different world.
Yeah, and that's the thing about FIU. It's always getting bigger too. You can't look at the skyline of FIU and not see a giant construction crane somewhere there. That's just how it is these days.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting though. That's I know a lot of people that have come through FIU in and around the time where I came through it, and there's so much pride associated with coming from FIU. And when they get a chance to come back, because the brochures and stuff don't do it justice, but when they come back and they actually see it and they're walking around, I mean, it's
Yeah, Raja. So, your first season with the Panthers, it was 1997. It was you and Carlos Arroyo. You guys immediately hit it off. I mean, you guys were the top 2 scorers on the team. You guys ended up going 21-8, and you guys were 13-0 record at home. It was the best record, I think, still stands to this day in school history. So, I think the main question would be just what made that team so special that, I mean, still to this day holds the record for the most wins in program history.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's pretty unique for a mid-major like FIU. At the time, we were the Trans-American Athletic Conference. So, at that time, I think it was really rare that you had an NBA backcourt as your starting backcourt. And so, that didn't hurt. But then we just had great pieces around. Like, we had a lot of guys that could really, really play at a high level and knew what they were doing. We had complete buy-in. And it took us a while to get on the same page. I mean, we weren't it wasn't a seamless transition. There were guys that were there at the beginning of camp or at the beginning of school that didn't wind up sticking around, and we had to weed, some people out and fill some people in. But the reality was we were a really tough group with a lot of bases covered, a lot of different skill sets. We were really versatile defensively before that became a thing. I'd play the 4 to the 1 defensively at the time. Carlos could play 1 through 3. At least, defensively he was able to. He was more of a 1, obviously, on offense, but we just had a lot of versatile pieces that allowed us to do some things that people weren't ordinarily doing at the time. And we should have been a tournament team that year. We lost to College of Charleston at College of Charleston in a just incredible atmosphere of a gym to play in. They were perennially a top 25 team at that time. And I was the reason. I just did not play well in that game. It was an ESPN game. I was super jacked. I had a lot to prove, or at least I thought I did, to the people up at BU. And this was our first big televised game, and I laid an egg. And we should have beat them. We beat them at home that year, and I just didn't play well.
I wanted to ask you before Johnny goes. You would kind of say that 1997 team, 98 team was kind of ahead of its time in terms of what you guys were doing at the time?
Yeah, I mean, at least defensively we were. I mean, offensively we were running stuff that a lot of people were running. We did get up and down though more. Carlos had this lack of structure, for lack of a better way to put it, in his game. It was a good thing, right? Because sometimes you come over, you get into high school, and you become like, hey, we got to come down and run this set type of point guard, and you're over monopolizing it and slowing the game down. Well, Carlos hadn't been here playing in high school so much, so he didn't have that. So we got out and ran a lot more than teams were doing at the time, right? So, there's a lot of footage of us just getting it off the and flying down, and Carlos is throwing a lob from half court, and one of us is just coming in, crashing, and catching a dunk on somebody. And so we were, again, more pace than a lot of teams, in the country, but we also had this flexibility defensively. I mean, our biggest guy was Darius Cook. He's about 6'8", 6'9", or Carell Rosario, who's probably 6'8", 6'9". But, Darius, again, while he played the 5 for us, him and Anthony Harris, who's one of my good friends, was 6'8". Like, these guys were Swiss Army knives. They could move. They could switch. They could be, guarding your 2 or your 1 in a pick and roll. And so we were able to do some things like that was ahead of its time in some regard.
Yeah.
And I was going to hit on Raja. I mean, first of all, I wish there was like footage then, because I feel like it's so hard, to find those highlights from those days.
It is.
But I was going to say, you talked about, you beat Penn State, you beat Alabama, the Michigan. We'll talk a little bit later. But obviously, it feels like then it was maybe more difficult to beat those P5 teams. You had to really schedule them specifically. But what was it like for you guys to be able to have the confidence to beat those P5 schools? I know maybe those teams. I think Michigan wasn't great that year. But what was it like to really have the confidence of being a team that high caliber with all those talented players?
Well, it was very cool that, first of all, Shaky, what it was selling point for a lot of us, that we were going to go out and try to schedule them. Because, again, a lot of us wore that chip, on our shoulder every day. And so, Shake guaranteed us, he was in alignment with that, and that's what we were going to do. And so, I mean, we came into your building, foolishly in some cases, but we weren't afraid. Like, we were trying to beat you. Like, they had us in the preseason NIT one year. We played North Carolina at North Carolina. Now, we got popped pretty good, but we weren't afraid to be there. We thought we should be there, And so, we had played Michigan the year prior up at Chrysler, I think, and it was a really good ball game, and they escaped, and they were really good that year. They had, Robert Traylor and Maceo Baston and Jawan, I forget his name, but they had a bunch of 5-star McDonald's All-Americans, and they might have beat us by 8, but it was a tight game. We had played people really tough. So if we saw you the second time and were silly enough to give us another game, and we felt really good about our chances the second time. But it was just a mentality. We were young and dumb and had chips on our shoulders.
So a rivalry, and again, I find it funny that you mentioned earlier that the University of Miami did not want to play FIU. That's kind of hilarious to me. But a rivalry that has been going on for decades in some regardless of sport.
Jake, I don't mean to interrupt. Let me tell you why, though. I'm going to tell you why. There are a couple reasons. Well, first of all, Shaky talked a whole lot of mess. Given any opportunity to do so, like he was calling them out of their name because he was trying to goad them into getting this game. My dad worked at University of Miami when I grew up. So when I was at FIU, he was an associate athletic director there. So wow. I actually thought I was going to go to Miami. Leonard Hamilton had in his office, and he told me he had, I could come there, but he had 5 pros, he told me, and I wasn't one of them. So if I wanted to come, I could come, but he didn't see me as one of the pros he had on his roster. So that's okay. It's fine. Not a problem. So, my recruitment was open again. And then, other schools came in. And then lastly, we played with those guys almost every day, whether, mostly it was at University of Miami. So we'd hop in the car, once we were done over at FIU, and, we'd hit 826 down to Miller. And we were on Miami's campus by the time pickup started that afternoon. And it'd be their 5 against our 5. And these were some physical dog fights of pickup games. Like some days literal fights broke out, but it was to a point where, it wouldn't make sense. There was nothing to gain for them playing us. And they knew because we were in their gym every day how we got down. So not saying that we definitely would have beat them, but it wasn't worth their time.
Mm-hmm. Did anyone ever record those pickup games? Do you know?
Yeah, I think anybody was in there with the old VCR, man. But I would have wanted to have seen those too.
Wow. Well, the usual suspects when it comes to a rival against FAU is FAU. Now, and that's a team that you matched up quite a bit, pretty much as consistently as FIU does these days. Play them twice a year. Unfortunately, it's not going to happen anymore because the Owls are heading out from Conference USA. But what was the atmosphere like at those FIU v FAU games, and how does it compare to recent years where it feels like the rivalry has sort of died down because of how, I hate to say it, how dominant FAU in basketball has become?
Yeah, well, when we were, they were big rivalries when I was in school. There were, I think our second largest crowd would be, FAU in my time there. Like at Michigan, we sold it out. Like it was incredible. It was just the craziest game I'd ever been to at FIU. But a close second would be, homecomings when FAU would come to town. And, those were cool because, you knew those guys. They weren't as close to you as University of Miami guys, so you didn't lock horns with them every day or every week, but you knew them, and you'd see them in pro-ams, and you try to measure yourself against them in the summertime, but you really got your real good look at them those 2 times a year, and it meant something to both schools, and I think we had them for homecoming both years. I don't know that we lost to them, but those were big games for us.
Wow.
Yeah, so just kind of going to 1998, 1999, just despite, the 13-16 record that following year where you guys went 21-8, you guys still beat the Michigan Wolverines in the first game of the season. As you mentioned, that was probably one of, it still stands to this day as the largest crowd ever seen at Ocean Bank as a convocation center. Just that atmosphere, Raja, just how was it, and just playing a team like Michigan, which at the time and still to this day is just a powerhouse in college basketball.
Yeah, no, that was really exciting. It had been on our calendar. Obviously, we trained all summer to prepare for them. It was like our giant for that year. Now we didn't know what kind of team they were coming in with, but I had got my thigh bruised. I didn't even think I was going to play in that game. I got meat in my thigh like 3 days before the game. I couldn't even bend my quad. And luckily, I got treatment on it and was able to move it. And I was able to play in that game because that would have been really, really tough had I not been able to play. But it was an incredible environment. I remember after we beat them, we had to go check into a hotel because, we had a very weird schedule that year. And you kind of alluded to the record. Like we played Michigan and then played the next night at home again against a really good tournament team in Northern Arizona. And so we had to go check into a hotel after the Michigan game. We had to stop by our rooms to grab our gear. And I remember getting back to the room after the Michigan game, opening the door, and I was weird because the door was open. And there was a party already in our living room. The various items that people would drink out of, stuff was going on. And it was crazy. We couldn't hang out because we had to play the next day. But that's how excited the campus was at the time because we had just beat Michigan, and then we had to get on the bus and go to the hotel.
Wow. Well, so let's move on to your time in the professional leagues. Yeah. And we can't get into the NBA immediately because, again, a fact that a lot of people might not know is that you began your professional career with the Yakima Sun Kings of the CBA, the Continental Basketball Association. So what I would like to know from your time there is what did you learn at Yakima that helped you prepare for the next step into the NBA?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jake. But what even fewer people would know is that before I played in the CBA, I was drafted into the USBL, the Tampa Bay Windjammers, which was a summer pro league for guys that would play in the CBAs and stuff like that. So you would have a chance to maybe spark a little interest before training camp started for NBA teams. And so that league was very, very tough. I mean, we would load into we'd fly into, let's say, Washington, and you play 4 games. You play Washington, and then you play 2 teams in Jersey, and you play a team in Pennsylvania. So you get off the plane in Washington, and you get in 3 mid-sized vehicles with these 6'5" to 6'8" guys, and you drive and you play, and then you get into New Jersey after the game at 1 a.m. And then at 8, somebody would come around because I was the rookie, and they would drop off this garbage bag full of everybody's socks and jocks and uniforms and tights. And all of that. And so I'd have to go sit in the laundromat and go buy some detergent and wash everyone's clothes, wait for them to wash, then put them in the dryer, dry them, grab lunch, come back, hand them out, go play, then drive to the next city. And I'd have to do that on every stop. So that was a very, very good like start for me in retrospect. I mean, first of all, I didn't care at the time because I was just playing basketball and that was kind of my dream, right? I wasn't making any money, but it didn't matter. I didn't have any bills to pay. But then I got to the CBA and things were a little nicer in the CBA. Like we were on buses now. We weren't crammed into these smaller cars. We had someone doing our laundry for us. Like there was an actual arena. We lived in a Best Western where you had your own room with a mini fridge. Like this was a step up. And so I learned a lot in terms of playing and what it takes to, prepare to be a pro and what it takes to, play pick and roll and space the floor. Like all of those things are great. But what I give those leagues the most credit for is giving me a real appreciation for what I had when I was in the NBA. Because I saw a lot of guys come back down to the CBA, or I saw a lot of guys when I would get to the NBA that just didn't appreciate, what some of us were doing and how hard we were working and what we would give to be in the NBA. And so, that was I made great friends there too, and I had great coaches, and we won a championship, and I was all rookie team. Like all of those things were great, but the best part of that for me was understanding like how difficult this is, how many people want to do this, how many people, are willing to sacrifice to do it. And if I thought that I deserved it more than any of them, then I had way more work to do. Like, like sometimes you can feel a little entitled, like, hey, you're good. I was in Hawks camp and, they told me they'd keep me if they had a spot. But, the reality was this was a grown man league with a bunch of professional basketball players who may or may not have sniffed the NBA already. And all of us were fighting each other to get back there. And it put some perspective on how difficult that would be and what I needed to do in terms of committing myself to get there.
After your time with Yamaka, you went to the San Antonio Spurs. You signed with them. Unfortunately, you got cut, never played a game with them. Then you went to the 76ers where you actually spent 2 seasons with them. That's where your NBA journey began. Just what was the whole mindset during that time, signing with the Spurs, just getting cut, and then just the emotions of all of that to then just finally go with Philadelphia and, kind of set your NBA journey there?
Yeah, well, that's a crazy story, man, because I tell this story to kids when I go to camps. Like I went to San Antonio and I just wasn't ready. Like the reality was they were doing high level stuff offensively and playing in a way that I had never really seen before, and indoctrinating me into that in a training camp wasn't realistic. So, they had to cut me. I know they liked what I had and could see that there was something there, but I just wasn't ready to help them. They were a championship level team at that point. So, I went back to the CBA to Yakima and I fractured my leg, and then the CBA folded while I was out there. And so I had to figure out how to get home. I had to get a plane ticket home, and I had rehabbed for like 2.5 months and I wasn't playing. So I went back to Sioux Falls, South Dakota to play for an IBL team or an IBA team and try to rehab. And before I could even play a game there, I was sitting with 2 of my good buddies. And I got a call from the 76ers. It was Tony DeLeo was their general manager at the time. And he said Pepe Sanchez had gotten traded, but wasn't traded back in time to make the playoff roster. They needed a spot, and I was the guy. So I went, and I asked them. I was like, hey, man, I got to know because I haven't played, and there are a lot of dudes cooking in these leagues right now. Like, what? They're like, well, Greg Popovich is Larry Brown's best friend. Greg Popovich loved you. He thought you were a great kid. He thought you were like the consummate pro. Everybody in camp, thought you were a great kid. And he told Larry that if we ever got a chance that we should take it on you. And so that was a pretty cool story. Like, because I love to tell kids this because you get so wrapped up in what you're doing on the court and how many numbers you're dropping and, how many assists you have and stuff like that. And none of that really mattered. What really mattered to Larry Brown was that his friend Greg Popovich thought I was a good dude. And that's what got me my call up to the Sixers.
And then after, the stint with Philly, then you go to Dallas, and then you go to Utah, and that's where, you start to take off your career. average over 10, around over 11 points a game. How did you feel in that time with Utah, and then eventually going to Phoenix, where people you know as? But talk about that time in Utah, where you kind of saw your career kind of going up and up and up.
Yeah, Utah was great for me. I mean, I had only ever been asked to defend. I played on some great teams, and at that time, that's kind of my role on a great team, was to just defend. Like Steve Nash and Dirk and Michael Finley shoot it, and I defend. Allen Iverson shoots it, and I defend. But this team had just lost Karl Malone and John Stockton. And Karl Malone went to the Lakers, and Stock retired. I reunited with Carlos Arroyo, which was really helpful for me. And Jerry Sloan, very much like Shaky, God rest both of them, he liked my brand of crazy. And he kind of allowed me to feel very comfortable in doing what I did. And so in the absence of all those great players, there were more shots on the table that allowed me to, have more offensive responsibility and spread my wings a little bit. And I just felt really comfortable in my own skin in Utah. I still do. Like, Utah is a place that my wife and I visit a lot. We've still got a lot of friends out there. That fan base, for whatever reason, was one that related to me in a way that was weird, but I felt really comfortable and really at home. And quite frankly, I wanted to stay there. I had every intention to stay in Utah. It's where I wanted to be. It just didn't work out. It worked out that Steve Nash in Phoenix, I had history with him in Dallas, and they came knocking.
Wow. Well, after those two very productive seasons with the Jazz, you joined the Phoenix Suns, which at the time were one of the best teams in the NBA. They had a roster that included the likes of Steve Nash, Sean Marion, and Amari Stoudemire. So what was it like to play for a team that was that talented while still making as big an impact as you did? You put up almost 15 points a game.
It was an incredible ride. I had no expectation going into it, really. I mean, I had come from Utah where I was averaging, 11, 13 my second year or something like that. I didn't know. But so I thought maybe I'd be sixth man, seventh man. This is a step up in terms of team. We didn't make the playoffs as a Jazz team. So naturally, I'm going to have to take a step back. And then when I got there, Joe Johnson had taken a nice contract in Atlanta. And Mike D'Antoni said, hey, listen, Joe's not here, and Quentin Richardson's not here. We have, he said 300, 400 three-pointers vacated. I need you to shoot 200 of them. And I was like, what? I said, brother, I shot like 80 threes last year. There's no way I can shoot 200 threes. But he just went about, like, in Mike's way, and only way Mike can do it, just empowering me and instilling, like, this level of confidence in me that just bolstered my own confidence in me. And every time I didn't shoot, he would be in my ear about shooting it. And so, before you knew it, I was starting and I was knocking down all these threes. And then I just felt like, it was much mine as it was anybody else's, So, like, I wasn't Stat, Steve, or Tricks, but we all felt a level of ownership of that team. We all had these roles that we played on it. And Mike and those stars were great at allowing us to do that. And so that was a special time. Two sons were born out there. I think we got robbed a couple of times. There were some things that happened via suspension that kind of hamstrung us, but those were great times and really cool offenses to play in.
Just before Johnny goes, I want to ask you quickly, the rivalry with the Lakers, you guys obviously met in the playoffs. You had the Spurs. Just what were those battles like, just being in the thick of it there, basically playing for an NBA Finals? Because at the time, those were the top three teams in the league, the Suns, Lakers, and the Spurs. Yeah,
those were – the West was loaded. It was a gauntlet trying to get out of that. The Clippers were even really, really good then with Brand and Kaman and Coutinho and Corey Maggette and Sam Cassell. Like, it was loaded. And so, obviously – Kobe is one of the GOATs, right? Like, he's a Mount Rushmore type of player. Playing him was as challenging as playing anybody ever for me. But I always relished the opportunity to do it. I always felt like if I thought I was good at what I did, then, I got to play the best at what juxtaposes that. And so if I'm a defender and he's a scorer, then let's get it. Let's see what happens. And, I never was under the misconception that I was going to be able to stop him, but I was going to be there to fight him. And hopefully at the end of the day, he would say, hey, man, like, good job. Like, hey, you did a damn good job. Like, and sometimes that's what it is, you know, like try to tell kids this, you'll win some, you'll lose some. But if the person you're competing against leaves that game and they feel like they just went through a war, then that you could, I mean, I can sleep at night, you know? And so, you know, that was cool. The Spurs were always kind of kryptonite-ish for us. Like, they just had one more answer than we did a lot of times. And some of that was bad luck. Some of that was, you know, self-inflicted. And then some of that was just them being a championship level team that just continued to do that over the course of time. You know, I thought our best chance to win it was my first year with Phoenix. And Mari was out, but we had gone 7 with the Clippers. We had gone 7 with the Lakers after being down 3-1. And we were really thin. Tim Thomas was playing great. You know, I was playing well. Boris was playing well. And in game 1 against the Mavericks, I felt a pop late in the game, like right before overtime started, in my calf. I thought somebody had hit me with a cup of ice or something, and it wound up being I had torn my calf. So we just didn't have enough bodies. We wound up losing to them. I sat 2 games and came back. I think we lost in 6. That's the year that D-Wade and Shaq won the championship.
Yeah.
The crazy part was we had beaten the Heat by 25 both times that year. So we felt really good that if we could just get through Dallas, it would have been a championship, because at the time Shaq couldn't get up and down with us. And, you know, it's just another one of those bad breaks that we kept catching.
Well, something I've heard a lot of former NBA players say in interviews and whatnot is that they feel insecure about their future in the league, as one day you could be on a team and then the next you're on a brand new team at the drop of a hat. And in this case, that happened to you after your time in Phoenix, when all of a sudden you became a member of the Charlotte, I was about to say Hornets, Bobcats, the Charlotte Bobcats. So I'd like to know how difficult it is, the process of joining a new team that all of a sudden has a different culture and a different game plan to the one that you were used to.
Yeah, I mean that's a really interesting question, because you know it happens so fast. Like you're traded and you have 48 hours to report, and so like those type of things are usually hashed out, you know, in a training camp or over a summer where you can kind of feel your way around and see how you fit in and develop the relationships. And you just don't have that opportunity when you get traded mid-season. So it's like, hey, you know, so for instance, I got traded when we were in LA going to play the Lakers right before I got on the bus. And I was like, my head was spinning because I was literally about to get on the bus to go play the Lakers. And so my wife had just given birth to my second son, Ty. He was probably a month old, and we had just opened a business in Phoenix. So now, you know, on top of what you're talking about with getting to this new team, you know, they're like, hey, you got 48 hours to go home, get whatever you can get, and then you need to be in Charlotte. And so I'm trying to figure out, like, how the hell is my wife going to handle all of this with 2 kids under the age of 2 years old? We got to shut down a business, we have to pack up a house. She's got to handle these 2 kids, and they got to get all of our stuff and get to Charlotte. And then, you know, that was hers, and I was worried about that. And then I had mine, where I'm living in a hotel. I'm trying to make these relationships on the fly. I had some experience with Larry Brown because I played for him in Philly. I kind of knew what he wanted to do offensively, but you know, there was some new wrinkles in it. And so I'm trying to feel my way through that. I had Boris Diaw with me that helped. I'm learning, you know, everybody. I'm learning the city. And at the same time, I'm out house hunting in between playing in these games and going to practice. So, like, there really is, and there are no complaints, right? Because we're getting paid great to do it. But it's really, really more difficult than the average fan would think when your favorite player gets traded from X to Y. Like, there's a lot going on. And, you know, luckily most teams have infrastructure set up to support. And they've got realtors and they have people that'll help you get where you need to go. And Charlotte was very good and very helpful in that. But it can be a very stressful time, not just for the player, but for their family.
Yeah.
So after your stint with Charlotte, you joined the Warriors, and coincidentally, you were there with Stephen Curry for his rookie year. You were, kind of when they were building what was now a dynasty, in today's day. Just, at the time when you look back, did it ever cross your mind that Curry would be just the player he is today? And not only Curry, but just that organization turned into what it is today, where they just won God knows how many championships.
Well, no, it didn't. A short answer. I mean, Del Curry was on the broadcast when I was in Charlotte, and that's when Steph Curry was doing what he was doing at Davidson. So I would frequently, and he was from Charlotte, and so I would ask Del and talk to him about his son all the time. Like I was a fan like anybody else was, and I'd ask him, like how he was doing and what was he thinking and where do you think he was going to go. And so then I got traded there, and I got to know him a little bit. Like Steph, I always tell my kids, Steph Curry was one of my rooks, man. He used to give me beignets when we were on the road. Like we'd send him out to Cafe Du Monde and he'd get us coffee and beignets. But you could tell he was a pros kid because, some guys in the league can think that they're too good for that and they don't understand the natural, like, kind of rite of passage that takes place. Steph was never a problem with any of that, but he had moments where you could see that there was something really, really special there. But it was his rookie year, and so, I wasn't around as much. I had torn a ligament in my wrist, but I would see him and you'd be like, wow. And I'd look over at, Devin George was one of the other vets on the team, and I'd look at him like, what the heck? And he'd just kind of nod at me like, yeah, dude, I told you there's something there. But I couldn't have imagined, just because he's been this transcendent player, like he's revolutionized the game. I'd be lying if I said that I sat. And his organization, while they were good when I was there, they weren't what they are now. Like they've done a very, very, very good job out there in terms of building it and really sustaining it over the last decade.
Wow. Well, Kevin, I think it's time for a break, a news break, if you will. So, without further ado, this is the Paws Up Podcast news break, where we, of course, take a dive into some of the latest stories in FIU athletics and just FIU in general. So let's start off with softball, who recently announced that they would be participating in the Conference USA tournament against the 5-seed Western Kentucky Hilltoppers. That game is tomorrow, Wednesday, May the 10th at 3:30 p.m. All games will take place in Ruston, Louisiana, home of Louisiana Tech. The softball team finishes the regular season with a 24-26 record, 10-14 in the conference, 17-14 at home, and are coming off a 3-game winning streak, a sweep against the UTEP Miners. So, of course, we wish the best of luck to the softball team in the upcoming tournament. Now let's move on to football. While the turnaround for transfers has slowed down just a bit, their secondary has just gotten a new piece with the addition of AJ Brathwaite Jr., a redshirt junior transfer from Western Kentucky. Now, AJ has shown glimpses of success during his time with the Hilltoppers, recording 17 tackles during his time there. Excuse me while I get some information here. Okay. While he had to sit out a few games last season due to injury, AJ brings experience to FIU's defensive backfield, which unfortunately they lost a big-time player in that of Demetrius Hill not that long ago. So we, of course, wish AJ the best of luck during his upcoming time here. And as Kevin just reminded me, only like a little bit ago, they also announced they have added quarterback Shaden Peary earlier today, a transfer from Georgia Tech, who most recently was a former JUCO player. He did not play with Georgia Tech in that year. But again, it's always nice to have a fierce quarterback battle. Of course, we had Grayson James on the show not that long ago, and I'm sure he'll be interested to see what Shaden Peary will bring to the FIU quarterback position. Finally, the FIU College of Medicine recently achieved a very impressive milestone. On the 10-year anniversary of the program, they just graduated their 1,000th doctor. The doctor in question is Jessie Lamonta, who did not know at the time she would be the 1,000th graduate, as seating was first come, first serve. The class of 2023 is 3.5 times larger than the original class, and the graduation comes after the announcement that FIU is partnering with Baptist Health to form an academic healthcare system that would serve Miami-Dade and Broward County. So congrats to the Herbert Wertheim College of Medicine. And that was your FIU news break. So Raja, again, thank you so much for being on with us. It's super awesome to have our first professional athlete on the show. Unfortunately, our good friend Billy Gill's legs just couldn't give in when he was a track star for FIU. So unfortunately, he could not be our first professional athlete. But let's get into some rapid fire questions here. So you're still, as you mentioned earlier, you're still involved with FIU. You go to sports events, you go to other things on campus. We've seen you at the Ocean Bank Convocation from time to time. Just what are your overall thoughts on state of the campus these days? You know, what's the go-to place to grab a meal, and just what's your favorite event to go visit here?
Well, grabbing a meal, I'm old school, man. I like the Taco Bell right over there on the corner, man. That's my spot. But you know, I love coming around to the campus, man. I like to I like to come catch football games and practices. I've been to basketball games and practices. New athletic director Scott Carr and Joe Cora over there are great, man. They make sure that you know, if there are things that people want to attend, that we're up to date on what's going on and when we can come check out a game or a practice and stuff like that. And that's been really awesome. I love to show my kids the campus. My wife is a former Golden Panther. She was a women's soccer player at FIU, so she too has a lot of interest in seeing what's going on around and got the new building and things like that. So we're around as much as we can be. I mean, we live, you know, a little ways up the road, so it's not as easy, but anytime we get a chance, we're down.
Mm-hmm. So as we were talking kind of before we started, you mentioned about your son, Diabel, who received an offer for FIU. I think it was his first D1 offer to play for FIU. And obviously, you know, there's still time left for him to make that decision. But, you know, how big would it be for you to have, you know, your son, Dia, play for FIU, which was your alma mater, and just kind of follow the footsteps, kind of just the collegiate way where he goes to FIU, where you used to go?
Yeah, I mean, I've lived a lot of dreams. I mean, I've lived more dreams than most people should. But if Dia were to play at FIU, I think, you know, for my wife and my wife was a better college player than I was. So for the two of us together, no, really, she was player of the year in the TAC and all of that stuff. So she was really good. I think for both of us, that would just be like living another dream. He's young. He's just a freshman. He's got a great relationship with Coach Mike Mack and the quarterback coach, Coach Yost. They've been really cool, and you know, we think the world of FIU. I love what they're doing with the program, and if Dia were ever blessed enough to be able to play at a school like FIU and wear that I don't know, what do they call it now? It's blue and yellow, like what
gold, yeah.
Blue and gold. I mean, like, that would be super dope, man. It would pretty undescribable, you know, to you guys. I mean, it would like living in a dream.
That's really awesome. But I was also going to add kind of another similar story about, I think 2 weeks ago, FI Hoops, they picked up a guy in the transfer portal, Jonathan Ibar, and you played with his father, Ramon Ibar. I'm looking to that. I think he's the first ever second generation FI Hoops basketball player. So what's that? How cool is that to see that happening here at FIU?
Listen,
getting, you know, last name that's you played with.
Yeah, Ramon was one of our teammates. Our group texts were buzzing when I saw that. Like, I caught it on Twitter and I shot it out. Like, it was pretty awesome, man. That's a really, really cool thing. I know Ramon's got. I lost touch with Ramon, but I know he'd be super excited. And you know that. Look, you know those are, you know, that's like a legacy kid, right? Like, his dad was a big part of some really good teams, and if he can hoop and he can add value to it, I mean, I just think that's great. Like, it's pretty cool for Ramon. I'm sure it's great for the kid. And I think it's great for FIU.
And add to that, you know, the athletic department has grown. And you talked about it, Scott Carr, and what he's done in the year has been so much. What have you thought about what he's done with this whole athletic department? And really, it's been night and day, you know, when he stepped here last year.
Yeah, I mean, I met Scott right when he got there at a football practice last year. And you know, he was super nice, and he came over and we started chopping it up, and I was just picking his brain curiously to see like what his vision was and how, he saw FIU getting from where it is to where it wanted it to go, and I was blown away and impressed by first of all what he thought it could be, and then secondly with the resources and the support that he was going to drum up and put into getting it there, right? And so, as I've watched from then to now, he's just done exactly what he said he was going to do, and I think they're on the right track. I think you can see it unfolding right before your eyes. The job's not done, but it's trending. And as former FIU Panthers and alumnus out there, like, we're all really excited and fired up about it.
And I know you've been to a couple of basketball games this year. I want to ask you, I know you take your brain a little bit, what current basketball player on this program kind of reminds me of your style of play?
Man, I mean, yeah, I don't know who reminds me a lot. They're all much better than I was. I mean, these people are so skilled. I mean, I really like the kid Arturo Dean. Like, he's a really good, flying around the court, skilled, physical, tough. Like, I enjoy watching that style of play, but, all of those guys are way more skilled than I ever was. So, it was just cool to come there and watch and support them and get to meet those guys. I got to go to a practice. My middle son, Ty, is a pretty good little basketball player. Maybe he'll get to play at FIU one day. But he's tough. He's really good. He played varsity at Pines Charter as a 7th grader this year, so he's pretty good. But I brought him down to a practice one time with Dia, and those guys were so nice to us, and the coaches were so inviting, and it was really cool to meet them. And then obviously to see them, playing and representing and putting on for FIU is dope too.
Who's up? Oh wait,
Kevin, you are up.
I am up. So now these are going to be a lot faster going questions. Just very quickly, who was the funniest teammate you've had in your college career? If it's NBA or college, just who's that guy who just kind of makes you guys just crack up and laugh?
So that's a great question. At FIU, probably my buddy Gene Durkak. He's probably we had some clowns though, but Gene was really funny. In the NBA, it's Eddie House. Eddie House was he could have a reality show. I mean, he could do a sketch comedy show or something. Eddie House is great.
And then just going on, you played for so many teams. Now you're retired. You can maybe choose that one team that you're rooting for nowadays. Just, do you have a team, or do you just kind of just maybe fall around the league?
Yeah, it's tough for me because I cover the league now, and I talk BA hoops, and so while I am partial to certain teams, like, it's really hard for me to pull for them because I have to try to call it how I see it and have an opinion on it. So, I mean, I'd be lying, like, in situations like Denver, Phoenix, if I said I wasn't slightly pulling for Phoenix, or, if Utah gets into something, I'll pull for them a little bit. But for the most part, I just like to watch good basketball, and I try to stay impartial.
Mm-hmm. So I'm a massive jersey / uniform buff, and I gotta know what was the cleanest jersey you ever wore in the NBA?
Man, the cleanest jersey I ever wore in the NBA. I'm trying to think. Those Golden State Warriors had some nice unis. They had some nice unis, but I think that black Sixers jersey goes really hard.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like that black Sixers jersey goes really, really tight. They weren't doing a lot with jerseys when I was in Phoenix, but that black Sixers jersey is probably my favorite.
Mm-hmm. So, and hopefully as we bring in more FIU alum, I'd like to ask them all this question, but who is in your FIU athletics Mount Rushmore?
Man.
Can be any sport, can be a player or a coach.
Let's see. Could be a player or a coach?
Correct.
That's a tough one. That's 4. I get 4.
How about the wife?
4.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, what? I mean, I'm going to go sit on the couch in like 10 minutes. Cindy Greenman is in there for sure. Cindy Greenman Bell. Let's see. I go with T.Y.
Yes.
Okay. Mike Lowell.
Yes.
Put my wife in there for sure. That's done. Stamp.
You're at 3. Yeah.
And then, I mean, I'd love to go with a men's hoop player like Carlos Arroyo or myself or Dwight. But I might go with Cindy Russo.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
legend. That's a legend.
That is an elite pick right there.
Yeah,
last thing here, Raja, and again, thank you so much for spending your time with us. And again, to all the fans watching on either our Twitter page or on the Lemon City Facebook YouTube, we hope you've been having a blast. I'd like to give a shout out, of course, to your own podcast, The Real Ones, from The Ringer, that of course you can catch on Raja's Twitter or just follow The Ringer as well. And you've been knee deep covering the NBA playoffs. So I just in layman's terms, who do you think? What teams do you think are advancing to the conference finals?
Man, that's a. I am the Heat. I'm taking the Heat. They look really good. I didn't see it coming.
I think the harder question is, do you see the Knicks winning another game?
Yeah, maybe not. Honestly, maybe not. I wouldn't bet on it. So I'm gonna take the Heat. I'm not privy to exactly what's going on right now. I think the Sixers was beating Boston.
Yeah, I have the score here. It's 73-59 in favor of Philly. 5 minutes to go in the third.
Wow.
So they're putting the work on Boston right now.
They're taking them to the woodshed. So I look, if the Sixers win this game, I'm taking the Sixers to win that series. So then I'm looking at Sixers Heat. Unfortunately, I think that's the end of the road for the Heat. I take the Sixers in the next round, and then I'm gonna take Denver and the Lakers.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's tough for me. But even though Golden State looked good, they keep fumbling the bag. Steph's not getting the help that he needs, and I don't know that Devin Booker. I mean, I love that. I just told you I pull for the Suns in some situations like this, but he's on a historic offensive pace. And I don't think that supporting cast plays the same way on the road in Denver. So I'm going to take Denver, and then I'll probably take the Lakers to beat Denver.
So your finals matchup is Philly in Los Angeles, and maybe it's way too early to make a prediction because the rosters could change, players could get injured. We hope not, but if it's a best of 7 between Philly and LA, who you got?
Man, that's it. Listen, if I'm getting this James Harden, right? If I'm getting the James Harden that showed up to the tune of 40 plus points in both games, it's a much tougher decision for me. I'm going to say Lakers. But if James Harden is playing like that, it could be a knockdown, drag out 7-game series is what I would love to see anyway. So
it is crazy, like the turnaround of that Lakers team, how they started. They go and get D'Lo, Vanderbilt, they get all these guys, and all of a sudden they were one of the best teams in the NBA in that second half, and it's crazy.
Been really cool, and I know it's a really small sample size, but some of the guys they're bringing in off the bench now, with fresh legs that look like they've been sitting over there waiting for that opportunity. Like, that is an awesome wild card to have in your back pocket in the playoffs. A guy that no one's accounting for and can really play. And so, Lonnie came in last night and even in game 3, had good minutes, and he's a player. So the Lakers are tough. They got to get to Golden State, but they're tough.
Yeah, it's pretty lights out if you ask me.
Yeah.
Lights out! Lights out!
Don't worry about that, Raja. Anyway, so Kevin, Johnny, do you have any other last minute questions for our awesome guest here, Raja?
No, I mean, this was a blast, chopping it up a little bit, and just hearing a story of a guy that, comes to FIU, balls out and grinds his way in, make the NBA, and, awesome stories to hear of, the great days, of FIU basketball in the 90s.
Yeah, just a huge thank you, Raja, for joining us. It was an honor to have you, and maybe someday, maybe soon enough, we'll get you back on soon here during the hoop season for FIU.
As soon as FIU basketball their season starts, got to bring you back, Raja. But until then, again, thank you so much for joining us. And again, on a very special episode. Super happy to talk some moves with you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, fellas. It's a pleasure, man. Good luck to you guys. My computer's about to die in like 1 second, but thank you guys so much, man. Paws up.
Of course. We got this right in time then. All right, then. Thank you so much, Raja.